What's up, guys? It's the Cheapster here. You might be wondering why I look like a ghost right now. That's because I decided to try one of those, shooting in your car things. The only problem is I'm doing it at night, not during daytime. So I have to use the lights above me, actually, make that a little bit better. But yeah, so I'm trying to get out of my house because my wife's asleep. It's pretty late right now. I'm trying to just record a video. I didn't want to wake her up, so hopefully this doesn't look too bad. But I'm trying something a little different today. I'm trying a kind of like a long format recording. Just some things I've been thinking about, which I do have a little bit prepared down here. So if you see me looking down, I'm just looking at my notes here. But one of the things I really want to talk about right now is just being a cheapster. I know there's a lot of people out there who are cheapsters like me and are kind of dealing with stuff in life, trying to figure out, the ways that you could be a cheapster and how to kind of navigate life when it comes to those type of things. So, first off, what I just want to talk about is why be a cheapster. So that's a really important fact. When if you think that you're a pretty cheap person, the question you want to ask yourself is why. Why do you want to be a cheap person? And I would say the answer to that for everybody is just going to be, it's based on what your idea of why you're doing it is. I mean, you're the only person that can answer that question. Why do you want to be cheap? And so much of that could just be, you know, different things. So I mean, it can be something like you're trying to provide for your future. I'd say that's probably the most important one, or not the most important, but the most common for people is just trying to provide for your future and having that idea, that dream that you're going to be something bigger one day, and just be able to relax more. I think most people are trying not to have to work as much, and just trying to get to a point where you can be more comfortable in your life. I think that's why a lot of people are cheap, but it could be for your family. Maybe it's really important to you to make sure you hand out money to your family, be able to provide for your family and stuff. That could be a big reason why you're doing it. Or maybe it's, taking trips. It's kind of weird to talk about taking trips right after I talk about taking care of the family, but there's no reason that's wrong. I mean, it's just what you're doing. I don't think there's necessarily a nobler cause to why you're being cheap. It's your decision. It's your money to save and to decide what you want to do with it. So I think it's up to people why they want to do that. But I would say make sure though that you do have a why. Make sure you have a reason that you're saving, and make sure you have a goal in mind that you're trying to save to. If you don't really know why you're saving, I think you're just going to set yourself up to fail right away, because it's a difficult thing to try to save your money, and it's hard if you don't know why you're doing it. You got to know the why. So I'd say it's really important. The other thing I want to talk about, and this is kind of the biggest reason I kind of wanted to do this video, is I just want to talk about being cheap is just not the norm today. And I think we are out of a time where it used to be the norm. I think especially, our grandparents, at least at my age, I'm 27, so my grandparents, I know they're more the people who were cheap. They try to save. Some of them lived through the Great Depression or were coming out of the Great Depression, so they kind of know the value of a dollar and hard day's work, and they try to I think instill those values into us. And I think down the line some of those values have gotten lost just a little bit. And I do think our generation is kind of maybe swinging back up in some ways, but also, it's some things are also a little not so great. But yeah, it's not the norm today, and it's hard to be a person who saves money and is cheap. A lot of people kind of think you're crazy, and most people have credit cards with tons of debt, and it's not really a question of do I have the money for it. It's just can I get it? So, and that's a very different question to say. Do I have the money for it, and can I get it? Because if you have a credit card, yeah, you can get most things. It's just something that's very different today than it used to be. And yeah, I think there's people are overbuying on houses. People are buying cars that they can't afford. It's different. So if you're a person who's cheap, yeah, you're gonna stand out like a sore thumb. I think. Is that the saying? A sore thumb, something like that. Green thumb? No, that's all right. I don't know. You're gonna stand out like something. So everyone's gonna notice that you're different than everybody. So that can be kind of hard to deal with. But I would say, as an encouragement to everybody who is cheap, going against the grain usually turns out to be a good thing. Usually doing the harder things are usually what actually build more character and help you actually become a better person. So and I would say I think this is one of those cases where being cheap, trying to be careful with your money, it's usually going to make you a better person. There's some exceptions, of course. Some people are just cheap because they're tightwads, cheapskates. Those aren't the people you want to be. But I would say usually it's going to be a good thing to go against the grain with people. And the other thing is it's hard. It's hard to be a cheap person in this age when it's just not the norm. Um, I just think it it gets kind of mixed up, and that's the part where I'm saying you want to make sure you're not a cheapskate, because it does get kind of mixed up with that. Some people, just trying to save money, they'll just kind of lump you into, oh, you're just greedy, or you're just all you care about is money. But you have to make sure that you're not falling into that boat. Make sure that you're being cheap for a reason, and you have a goal, and that you're not just following down that line, being a greedy person. If you are a greedy person, then yeah, that's a problem. I would say you need to work on your heart to find a way to not be a greedy person. But I would say don't, if you know that you're not that kind of person and you're just trying to be cheap, don't take too much of what people say to heart with that kind of stuff, because I think a lot of people just don't fully understand it, being a cheap person. People just aren't in that mindset a lot of times. They don't really understand where we're even coming from as a cheap person, because to them it's just money's money, so they just spend it, and that's that. They don't really see the whole idea behind it of what it could bring you in your life. So that's just something to think about there. But I would say all this stuff with it being hard, and it being the path that's kind of difficult to go against the grain. I would say that's why we're seeing a lot of people today who are making it to retirement and they just don't have money. People are still having to work part-time jobs when they're super old, working into their 80s and things, or having their family provide for them. And I think a lot of people just don't want that. I think a lot of people are starting to care, where they're kind of seeing that, and that's not what they want. And it's encouraging to see people who do want to be cheap and try to save and provide for themselves and make sure that they can, retire with, I guess, dignity and respect, like that you enjoy the rest of your life. And that's a hard thing to get to that point. But I think there's a few things of advice that I just want to give people who are also trying to be cheap, trying to work towards goals of, whatever, just trying to be cheap. But the first piece of advice I give you is just keep working hard. Keep working hard. Things will fall into place. Keep trying to make money. Keep trying to save as much as you can. Just keep pushing at that, because I know I heard a story once of a guy who only made, like, I forget, it's something like under 50,000. That's the most he had ever made in his entire life. By the time he retired, he had never made more than 50,000. And he just saved. He was smart with his money, and he became a millionaire in the end. So there's lots of stories like that with people who just try to go down that path and try to save what they can, and their lives turn out pretty well. So just keep working on it, keep grinding on it, and I think if you just keep sticking to the plan, then I think eventually you'll get there. And make sure the people around you are going to encourage you, even if they don't fully understand kind of the mindset you're coming from, because that's a little hard. A lot of times you have friends or family that don't fully understand what you're doing. They might think you're crazy, and that's okay. Just make sure that they're going to be encouraging to you, and not tear you down, because there's a lot of people that just want to tear you down if you're not going to go out and drop $200 on a meal with them on a Tuesday or something. But that might be a little more extreme, but there are people like that. So you just have to be careful, what kind of people you're around, that they're not shaping you or peer pressuring you to spend more than you feel comfortable with or more than you want to. So I would say that that's a pretty important piece of advice there. But also I would say to have a goal in mind, so it's not endless pursuit of just trying to save money. So I just said that at the beginning, but yeah, just have a goal in mind of where you want to be and when you reach that goal, I think that's a part where people have trouble, where it's hard for me to think because I feel so far away from my goal. But I know there's so many stories of rich people that, they had a goal where they just wanted, or they didn't have a goal actually. They were just trying to, make money, trying to get to a certain point, but it wasn't really a point in their mind. And they become, richer than anybody around. And you just keep going and going. But if you don't really have a goal in mind, then you could spend the rest of your life and wake up one day, realize you're like 80 years old and you wasted your life just saving up money, and now you can't do much, or you've only got a few years left in your life. And so you want to be careful not to just be chasing money just to be chasing money. Make sure you're chasing it for a reason. I think that's really important to make sure that you've nailed down why you want to have money, what's important to you. And then the other thing, I think this is the most important piece of advice, and that's just be a generous person. Don't be cheap, and then also be very tight-fisted with giving to people. Make sure you're a generous person, because I think that opens up a lot of possibilities in yourself. It helps you kind of keep that, that love of money and greed away from yourself when the times come that you can give and you have the money to just give to people is going to make you feel really good about it. And it makes it more important when you know how much money, or how much work you've put into trying to save that money, and knowing that when you give it to somebody, it's that much more important to you that you can give that money. So yeah, just being a generous person. Don't let greed get the best of you while you're saving. Just try to find ways to be generous with people. And then this is a quote I've heard a lot of times, and that's to live like no one else today so you can live like no one else tomorrow. Meaning that you live like nobody else today, where everyone thinks you're crazy and you're just tight on money all the time and people don't fully understand what you're doing. But later down the road, you'll be the one that's kicking it back in a beach resort and sipping on a margarita. And, that's, or whatever the goal is that you want. Maybe that's the goal I kind of like. That sounds pretty good to me. But, just trying to get to that place is just, it's an adventure, and making it an adventure to get to that point. So that's pretty much all I got, though. So I hope this was encouraging to you guys. I know it's hard being a cheapster today, so I hope fellow cheapsters that watch this channel, I hope you appreciate the things that I'm putting out, and hopefully they're able to help you guys. And so yeah, just remember, guys, stay cheap.